Ash forced into marriage to repay family debt. The purple-skinned girl named Kira pressed her face against the cold metal of the transport ship window as the blue marble of Earth grew larger before them. Her three-fingered hands trembled as she wiped away the tears that had been flowing steadily for the past 2 days since leaving her home planet of Valera. Crystalline tears left faint trails down her cheeks that glowed softly in the dim light of the passenger compartment. Her father Jorik sat beside her with his shoulders hunched in shame. The massive debt their family owed to the Galactic Commerce Guild had finally come due, and there was only one way to settle it. The humans of Earth had requested a cultural exchange marriage, and the Guild had seen an opportunity to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Kira would marry a human male, and her family debt would be forgiven. It was a business transaction, nothing more. Kira had never seen a human before, but she had heard the stories. They were said to be violent creatures who had somehow managed to claw their way up from a primitive world to become one of the most feared species in the galaxy. Their homeworld was a death trap of extreme weather predators and natural disasters that would kill most species within days. Yet humans thrived there and had spread across the stars with a determination that both impressed and terrified other races. The stories painted them as emotionless beings who viewed everything through the lens of survival and conquest. They formed bonds based on utility rather than affection, and their marriages were cold, calculated affairs designed to produce offspring and secure resources. Kira shuddered at the thought of spending her life with such a creature. As their ship entered Earth's atmosphere, Kira caught glimpses of the legendary human cities sprawling across the continents. The buildings reached impossibly high into the sky, and the lights twinkled like stars scattered across the surface. It was beautiful in a harsh industrial way that spoke of a species that had bent their entire world to their will. The spaceport was a bustling hub of activity, with humans moving about with purpose and efficiency. Kira noticed how they seemed to communicate with subtle gestures and expressions, rather than the elaborate displays of emotion common among her people. Their faces were masks that revealed nothing of their inner thoughts. A tall human male approached their landing area. He wore simple clothes and had brown hair that fell across his forehead. His eyes were a warm brown color that seemed to take in everything around him. This was David, her intended husband. He moved with the controlled grace that all humans seemed to possess, a readiness for violence that was barely contained beneath a civilized exterior. David extended his hand to Jorik in what Kira assumed was a human greeting ritual. Her father fumbled with the unfamiliar gesture, but David waited patiently and helped guide him through it. When David turned to Kira, she flinched involuntarily, but he simply nodded respectfully and kept his distance. The human spoke in accented galactic standard, explaining that he would escort them to their temporary quarters, where they could rest before the ceremony tomorrow. His voice was deeper than Kira expected, and carried none of the harsh mechanical quality she had been told to expect from humans. As they walked through the spaceport, David pointed out various landmarks and explained human customs in a way that was informative without being condescending. Kira found herself stealing glances at her future husband. He was not what she had expected at all. Where she had anticipated cold calculation, she saw quiet thoughtfulness. Where she had expected barely contained aggression, she saw careful consideration of others around him. When a small human child ran into his path, David smiled warmly and helped the youngster find his parents rather than showing irritation at the interruption. The quarters David led them to were spacious and comfortable, with windows that looked out over a garden filled with earth plants. The room had been prepared with Velaran dietary needs in mind, and even included a small shrine area where Kira could perform her daily meditations. Someone had clearly put considerable thought into making them feel welcome. David explained that he would return in the morning to begin the traditional courtship rituals that would lead up to their wedding ceremony. He assured Jorik that all legal documents had been prepared, and that the debt forgiveness would be processed immediately following the ceremony. Before leaving, he turned to Kira and in her own language wished her pleasant dreams. The fact that he had learned to speak Velaran surprised her more than anything else that had happened that day. It suggested a level of care and preparation that did not fit with what she had been told about humans. As the door closed behind him, Kira found herself wondering what other assumptions about humans might be wrong. That night, as she lay in the comfortable bed provided for her, Kira stared up at the ceiling and thought about the human who would soon be her husband. David had been nothing like the monster she had been expecting. He had been kind, patient, and respectful in ways that suggested there was much more to humans than the stories told. For the first time since learning of her fate, Kira felt a small spark of hope that perhaps this arrangement might not be the nightmare she had been dreading. The next morning brought with it a series of revelations that would change everything Kira thought she knew about humans and about the man she was about to marry. David arrived early carrying a small bundle of what appeared to be gifts. He had spent the night learning more about Velaran customs and had prepared offerings that would be appropriate for a traditional courtship. The first gift was a small crystal that had been carved to catch and reflect light in patterns that reminded Kira of the aurora displays on her homeworld. David explained that he had commissioned it from a Velaran artist who lived on Earth specifically because he wanted to give her something that would remind her of home. The thoughtfulness of the gesture brought fresh tears to her eyes. The second gift was a translation device that would allow her to communicate more easily with humans while she learned their language. David had programmed it with common phrases and expressions that would help her navigate daily life on Earth. More importantly, he had included a section on human emotional expressions, so she could better understand the subtle ways humans communicated their feelings. The third gift was a small plant from her homeworld that David had somehow managed to obtain. It was a flowering vine that Velaran women traditionally kept in their homes as a symbol of beauty and growth. David had already prepared a place for it in what would be their shared quarters, and had researched the specific care requirements it would need to thrive in Earth's atmosphere. As David presented each gift, he explained his reasoning and his hopes for their future together. He spoke of wanting to create a home where both human and Velaran traditions could coexist. He talked about his desire to learn about her culture and to share his own with her. Most surprisingly, he expressed genuine concern for her happiness and well-being. Kira realized that everything she had been told about humans was not just wrong, but deliberately misleading. The stories that painted them as cold and calculating were propaganda designed to make other species fear and avoid them. The reality was that humans were capable of great warmth and compassion when they chose to show it. David had clearly spent considerable time and effort preparing for their marriage. He had studied her language, her customs, and her people's needs. He had gone to great lengths to ensure that she would be comfortable and that their union would be built on mutual respect rather than mere obligation. This was not the behavior of a species that viewed marriage as a cold business transaction. The wedding ceremony itself was a blend of human and Velaran traditions that David had carefully researched and planned. He had arranged for a Velaran priest to perform the traditional blessings alongside a human officiant. The decorations included flowers from both worlds, and the music incorporated melodies from both cultures. It was clear that David viewed this not as a burden imposed by galactic politics, but as a genuine opportunity to create something beautiful. As they exchanged vows, Kira found herself looking into David's eyes and seeing something she had never expected to find in a human. There was kindness there and patience, and what might even be the beginnings of genuine affection. When he spoke his vows in her language, his pronunciation was careful and respectful, showing that he had practiced extensively to get it right. The reception that followed was attended by both humans and the small Velaran community that lived on Earth. Kira watched in amazement as David moved easily between the two groups, translating conversations and helping everyone feel included. He had clearly put as much effort into ensuring their wedding guests had a good time as he had into making her feel welcome. Later that evening, as they sat together in their new home, David asked Kira to tell him about her life on Valera. He listened intently as she described her family, her friends, and the beauty of her homeworld. When she spoke of missing the purple skies and the singing crystals that grew in the mountains, David promised that they would visit Valera together someday so he could see it through her eyes. In return, David told her about his own life and his hopes for their future. He spoke of his work as a terraforming engineer and his dreams of creating gardens that could support life from multiple worlds. He talked about his family and his desire to create a home where children could learn about both human and Velaran cultures. Most importantly, he assured her that he would never expect her to give up her identity or her traditions to fit into human society. As the days passed, Kira began to understand that she had not been sold into slavery as she had feared. Instead, she had been given an opportunity to be part of something unprecedented. David was not just her husband, but her partner in creating a bridge between two very different worlds. The marriage that had begun as a way to settle a debt was becoming something far more meaningful. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when Kira learned the truth about the debt that had forced her into this marriage. David had quietly investigated the matter and discovered that the Galactic Commerce Guild had been systematically creating false debts to force families into unfavorable arrangements. Her family's debt had been fabricated, and other Velaran families had been similarly victimized. Rather than simply accepting the situation, David had used his connections within the human government to expose the Guild's criminal activities. The organization was shut down and the false debts were canceled. More importantly, David had ensured that other families would not suffer the same fate that had befallen Kira's family. When Kira asked why he had gone to such lengths for people he had never met, David simply smiled and said that it was the right thing to do. He explained that humans had a saying about treating others as you would want to be treated, and that he could not stand by while innocent families were being exploited. It was in that moment that Kira realized her tears had stopped flowing entirely. What had begun as a forced marriage to repay a fabricated debt had become something beautiful and real. She had found not just a husband, but a partner who valued her as an individual, and who was willing to fight for justice on behalf of people he had never met. The galaxy had been wrong about humans, and Kira had been wrong about her fate. Sometimes the most beautiful things in life came from the most unexpected places, and sometimes the scariest situations led to the most wonderful outcomes. As she looked at David, working in their garden, tending to plants from both their worlds, Kira knew that she had found something precious beyond measure. The story of their marriage would become legendary among both humans and Velarans as an example of how two very different species could come together to create something beautiful. But for Kira, it was simply the story of how she had found love in the most unexpected place, and how her tears of sorrow had been transformed into tears of joy.